Cosmic Frequency, Tuning into the Awakened Heart. This program is brought to you by Pranaluz Conscious Living. My name is Ana Lu, and I am the founder of Pranaluz and host for the Cosmic Frequency podcasts. Our podcasts focus on three main pillars: spirituality and social and environmental awareness. Today's topic is lucid dreaming, and our guest today is Ben MacKinnon. Ben was born in New Zealand and currently lives in Australia. He's a Dzogchen practitioner in the Nyingmapa tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. He has written 3 children's books introducing to kids yoga, meditation, and dream practices, along with his own personal dream journey in the Diary of a Lucid Dreamer. He's a qualified nurse and a firefighter, along with a yoga teacher in Vinyasa Krama and massage therapist. He has been involved in yoga, bodywork, and healthcare for 20 years and is passionate about sharing his love for yoga, breathwork, bodywork, and dream practices with those tired and weary in a world of ever-increasing speed. In his spare time, he's an avid traveler and a surfer. So hello, Ben.
Oh, hello.
How are you?
I'm good.
Well, thank you for being with me today in this podcast. So today we'd like to talk a little bit about lucid dreaming. So to share a little bit about your practice. So if you maybe want to start by letting us know, what is this practice about?
Yep. So, there are a few differences. So, you have lucid dreaming, and then you have dream yoga. And dream yoga, dream yoga has been in other spiritual practices besides Tibetan Buddhism, but Tibetan Buddhism probably took dream yoga the furthest than any other sort of spiritual organization or structure. But lucid dreaming is a facet of dream yoga. Lucid dreaming is probably what more Westerners are familiar with through. Became quite popular in the 1980s when a Stanford PhD student, Stephen LaBerge, he basically proved that lucid dreaming was a real phenomena. And so that sort of gained a lot of popularity because before that people were having strange experiences in dreams and lucid dreams, but modern psychology basically said that lucid dreaming was sort of like a misinterpretation or a fantasy, that it wasn't actually something that was really happening. And you also had Carl Jung. He was a pretty prolific lucid dreamer, so his concepts of the archetypes came through his lucid dreaming experiences. Lucid dreaming is part of dream yoga. Lucid dreaming is probably, for most Westerners or people new to the practice, it can be an easier place to start, and then you move into dream yoga, because dream yoga is kind of coming at things in a lot broader context. So you could say in lucid dreaming, your main focus is to recognize that you're dreaming while you're dreaming, and then you can carry out maybe a predetermined skill or wish in the dream. And then dream yoga is a lot more broad, where you're more sort of going towards an exploration of consciousness itself and a dissolving of sort of the self as an identity, and that bleeding over into the waking life.
Beautiful, Ben. Thank you. So it is like starts with the realization that you are, or becoming awake in the dream, right? That's the start of it. Realizing that you are awake and that you are the dreamer.
Yeah. So most people have had, like pretty much most people have had a spontaneous lucid dream. They might have just categorized it as a strange experience in a dream. For many people, the dreams, I guess nightmares, especially quite strong nightmares where you might wake yourself up from the nightmare is actually the beginning of a lucid dream. So if you imagine that you were in a nightmare and you become anxious or worried and you want that experience to stop, and so you're able in that dream to know that you're in a nightmare and you wake yourself up back to waking reality. So a lot of people have a lucid dream that way but don't recognize it's a lucid dream. It might just be a strong nightmare triggers them into lucid awareness, but because of the fear response being stronger, they will progress to waking consciousness as opposed to using the nightmare to continue in the dream lucidly. So for most people, lucid dreams are kind of like quite a short experience. It might be they're in a dream, all of a sudden they realize something strange in the dream because dreams are strange. They realize it's a dream, and normally, because sometimes lucid dreams can be as real as waking reality in their experience, and sometimes even a sensation of being more real because you're not limited by your physical body and the input mechanisms of hearing and touch and taste and seeing. You can have experiences which are more vivid, say visually or auditory or physically. And so what happens is people get quite overwhelmed by the experience. So they become, generally they elevate quite quickly. They become excited or fearful, and that elevation in their mood will generally wake them up. That's pretty common.
Yeah, I think it'll be great to talk more about your experiences. And I understand that this is a practice of the lineage of Vajrayana, right? In the Dzogchen, the Tibetan Buddhism. So do you know how do these Buddhist monks, when they practice it, or what's their intention of their practice in general, or what they use it for?
Okay, so it depends on what the vehicle is. So you had dream yoga was, I guess, for the Nyingmapa lineage, was brought by Padmasambhava, who was, I guess they call him the second Buddha, who was an Indian saint who came to Tibet, and the king basically wanted him to bring Buddhism to Tibet. And he was a tantric Buddhist practitioner, but also a Dzogchen practitioner. So he'd mastered the tantric practices surrounding the Vajrayana vehicle, which is called the diamond vehicle. And what he basically taught, I guess you also have what Padmasambhava taught, but you also have what's called the 6 yogas of Naropa. So the 6 yogas of Naropa, you have Tumu, illusionary body yoga, you have dream yoga, and they're all sort of vehicles towards realization. So probably the easiest to start is with the Tantric Buddhist approach, which is different to the Dzogchen approach. So Dzogchen will use some of the tantric practices, but it has a different aim. Whereas in tantric Buddhism, it's more about working with energy and transformation of energy. So in the, I guess, dream yoga from the Vajrayana or tantric Buddhist perspective, which was brought by Padmasambhava, you're really working with, obviously, first recognizing your dreaming, and then you will start to work quite specifically with practices. So it might be, say,
Like
uh,
emotions or fears, or specifically things you need
uh,
to work on, or?
yeah, more with the space itself. So say I become lucid in the dream, and I might try and make an object bigger and smaller. Yeah. And then once I've mastered that, I might do something different. Like I might transform one object into another object, or I might multiply objects, or decrease the number of objects, or transform a scary entity into an angelic being, or I might transform my body from, I don't know, into a wrathful deity or into a peaceful deity. And so what I'm doing is I'm taking the dream and I'm manipulating it, and I'm finding out what I can manipulate and what I can't manipulate. And so what you're doing is you'll find that some things you can't do. So it might be you really struggle with walking through objects, or you really struggle with bringing objects into existence, or you really struggle with transforming yourself into something else. And it shows you that there's an attachment point that's called reification. There's something that you're believing is not possible in the dream. But when you're in the dream state, you're in a pure mental state, in a pure mental body. So there isn't any restrictions. The only restrictions in the dream state are the preconceived restrictions that the dreamer brings to the dream.
Exactly.
And so that's really what you're trying to do, is you're unwinding yourself through basically anything you can think of. Like there's a text in the Bon tradition called the Mother Tantra, which also had dream yoga, and they have quite specific, it's transform this into this and then do this into this, and it progresses. But as it goes into the further stages, it might be, say, transform a wrathful or scary dream into a peaceful dream. But as you progress to later stages, Padmasambhava talks about actually letting, say, a nightmare play out lucidly. So say in the earlier stages of my practice, I would meet something which you'd call a nightmare, and I would use my will and my belief to overcome the nightmare through my power. And then, or I might integrate it and love it, and we might join together, like very Jungian psychology, like the archetypes and coming together and into individuation and integrating, or you can go further than that and you can actually just let the nightmare play out. So say I'm in a nightmare and something is going to eat me. Instead of me transforming anything, I actually just let myself be eaten. And in the process of letting myself be eaten, I come to realize that the thing that I was protecting is also an illusion, because in the dream, your body itself is an illusionary body. Yeah.
Yes. So Ben, so this idea of like becoming awake in the dream and realizing that everything that's in the dream, it's your creation and you are the dreamer, and it's all an illusion. Once, let's say, you are able to start, like you said, like making an object smaller, or maybe, going through walls, or stopping gravity or things like that, right? So this realization that it's all an illusion, how does that help like us in the real world? Let's say, how does that apply, or what's the benefit of that in the real world? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, when you're doing proper dream yoga practice, you fall asleep in different blocks. So in the original stuff, you might go to sleep and then you would wake up, and that would be your first block, and you would fall asleep maybe on the throat chakra as you fell asleep, and then that would affect the nature of the dreams and also be a way of purifying the throat chakra through that phase. And then the second phase, you might be focused on the third eye chakra, and that will have implications on the dream. And then after that, you might fall asleep on the heart chakra, and maybe finally on the chakra at the genitals. And so you're affecting the nature of the dreams. The chakra at the genitals is generally considered to bring on more nightmarish dreams. So in later practice, they say, you can start to work with that so that you induce nightmares, willingly induce nightmares in order to work with fear. So I guess to answer the question of like, what is the crossover? The major crossover really is that we dream the way that we live. Yeah. So like what happens when we go about our day is we move about our day most of the time following predetermined operating systems or schemas. Yeah.
Yeah.
So schemas are ways that we navigate reality in order to stay alive and get what we need and fulfill our desires and stay safe. And we learn those as a child. There can even be genetic components to that. We can learn them through trauma. We can learn them through reward. And those schemas sometimes, for many of us, can actually limit our true capacity. They kind of, as we get older, they become kind of like grooves of a river, and the river can't really go in other directions anymore because it's kind of been running in one direction for so long that it's not possible to go in another direction. So if you think about your textbook old woman or old man who's stuck in their ways about the way the world should be and the way men and women should be. A lot of that's coming from, what they've learned during their experience, and now they're quite stuck. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's the big benefit is when we dream the way that we live. So I use my practice a lot to tell me how I'm living. Like, say at the moment, my practice is not going as strong as it normally would. And it's, obviously there's a lot going on in the world at the moment. I've got some things with the future I'm trying to determine and waiting for that are sort of out of my control. And so I'm maybe not as present as I normally would be, and that shows in my dreams with the amount of lucidity that I tend to have. So I use my dreams a lot to see how I'm engaging with my waking reality. So if my dreams are not lucid or vague, or I'm forgetting them, I generally know that there's something I'm doing during the day that's affecting my dreams. And if I want to rectify my dreams, I need to rectify my behavior during the day.
Very good. So it could be like a reflection of what's happening in the daily life, but it could also be like, let's say I personally want to work with certain fears or certain patterns that I've had, or so that I could also kind of set an intention for that dream practice that evening, so that I could work with those specific things, right?
Yeah. So you can use, like, in the sort of standard Liburgian lucid dreaming sort of stuff, which is more sort of psychoanalytic, psychology based. You can use visualization to, say, before you go to sleep, imagine yourself facing a nightmare that you've been having. So you might sort of run through meeting the nightmare figure or having the nightmare experience, recognizing it's a dream, and then carrying out a different behavior pattern. So you're essentially doing a run through practice in the hope that when you become lucid, you will carry that out. It's like they call it prospective memory. So we remind ourselves to do something at a later date. As I go past the supermarket, I tell myself, okay, on the way back, I need to get some bread. So that's type of memory is quite useful type of memory. And Stephen LaBerge was able to develop his own lucid dreaming techniques, where he eventually was able to attain lucidity pretty much at will every night through the use of prospective memory. So what happens with lucid dreaming practice, it's interesting, there is this natural progression where Alan Wallace, he's a Dzogchen teacher, a Westerner who was an interpreter for the Dalai Lama in the 70s, and he's very well practiced in dream yoga. He talks about, I guess how to explain, he talks about this thing where when you start to become aware of what you weren't aware of, there's a natural sort of upwelling of stuff which was hidden, which naturally comes to the surface. So yes, you can actively seek out a nightmare, but you'll find that actually by becoming aware of your dreams, trying to become lucid, writing down your dreams, which is a really important practice, especially for Westerners. Writing down your dreams will straight away induce more lucid dreaming and allow you to see patterns of dreams that you're having and patterns of themes that you're having. And then you'll be able to look on your life and see, okay, well, what's going on in my life that reflects the pattern of that dream? Yeah.
Yeah.
But naturally, you will approach your fears through the practice of lucid dreaming and dream yoga. It's actually a byproduct of the practice. I say to people that if you're serious about the practice, you have to come to terms with the fact that you will meet your worst nightmare and you will have to go through it. And a lot of people get into lucid dreaming because they want to fly or they want to have incredible experiences. And I
It
say to
also
people,
shows
that's
you your
good.
dark side, right? So it also shows you your dark
Yeah,
side.
and you have to be willing to, because it will meet you eventually. So what happens for some people is that they become lucid, they have some nice experiences, and then this other side comes out. And normally for a lot of people, they freak out and then they kind of stop the practice. They're like, "Oh, I'm done. Like that's not. I don't like that. Like I don't like what's happening." There was You know, I didn't like what I met. Even some practitioners will interpret that some dark entity came into their dream, and that, you know, it might have been more sort of like a, you know, demonic figure which came from another realm into their dream, because they can't accept that they could make something so disgusting from their own mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, I guess it can be scary for some people to start. Maybe we can talk a little bit more of tips of how to practice and how to get started with that. But I also wanted to ask you, how did you come up on these teachings? What's been your experience or your practice, and why are you so passionate about it? Because when I met you, you know, me and Ben, we met in Bali, and I remember we immediately started talking about this, and you shared about lucid dreaming so passionately with me. So I know it's been your practice for many, many years. So maybe you want to tell us a bit of your story with with it.
Yeah. So, I mean, as a child, now I look back as an adult, I was, you know, I mean, I think most children are actually quite natural lucid dreaming. My perspective on it is children are already lucid dreamers, and then what happens with conditioning as they become older and they enter the school system and they develop a stronger sense of identity and gender and ideas of schemas, they lose a capacity that they were born with. And I think lucid dreaming is normal personally. I think that the way we live in this society, which, I mean, I think we're all seeing a lot of this happening at the moment, is actually a very abnormal way to live. And I also worked as a registered nurse in mental health, dealing with people with depression and anxiety and PTSD. And the human experience is very challenging and very painful, but also the way that we have organized that experience and the structures and institutions and the things that we follow and the ways that we engage and the predetermined norms that we follow without even knowing, uh, they, in many ways, they actually put us to sleep. So I guess during our waking experience, we go from being like a child who is in the moment and reacting and being kind of quite present, even though children can become quite emotional. And we become kind of more like sleepwalkers, and we lose a capacity which we innately had. So when I was a child, I had a lot of lucid dreams. I had a lot of strange experiences in dreams. In dream yoga, the out of body experience
Hmm.
is part of dream yoga, and I remember having things like that happen as a child and as an early teenager. And I think the biggest, I guess, why I'm passionate about it is that I lost the capacity probably through my early adult years. So I'd say I stopped having lucid dreams on a regular basis from my teenage years. I'd have a spontaneous one once in a while, and then in my sort of, I guess, coming towards mid 30s, it just came back very strongly. But I had been practicing meditation then for probably 12 years, and I had been doing a lot of different practices. And it had kind of awakened something which had been dormant in me. But looking back as a child, I think if I had people around me, or maybe parents who understood lucid dreaming and understood what was happening and talked with me about it, I probably, one, would have retained the ability for longer and seen the value, and two, would have had less fear surrounding it.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
I think that's a big thing. But I guess for me, it was just always there. Like I remember as a child being, you know, 3, 4 years old. And I remember like looking at old yoga books and Buddhist books and seeing pictures of yogis doing weird breathing techniques and the chakras. And I remember finding it like super, super interesting. Like I just remember, yeah, finding it very interesting and all this sort of like esoteric stuff going on. And so there was always sort of this
That interest,
awareness
yeah,
of it.
the awareness, yeah.
But the dream, I think dreams too, I always had even when I'd stopped lucid dreaming, I would have very strong dreams, and I would have dreams of things, and then they would happen, and then I would be in the experience and realize I'd dreamed about it a couple of nights before, and a lot of things like that. My mother had a lot of things like that. And then as far as the actual formal practice, though, of dream yoga, that didn't really come into my life till about 5 years ago. And I guess it was just a whole lot of coincidences that all came together. So I write about it. I wrote a sort of book going through that experience, which goes through, my lucid dreaming coming back. And I mean, I had meditated for sort of a good 12 years before it, but in all honesty, what brought it back was I was at a phase in my life where I had been meditating, and I'd sort of fallen into a bit of a scene where I was exploring psychedelics to try and, I mean, it was quite egotistical actually when I look back. Like, I was trying to speed up, I guess I was trying to speed up this. I had this, thing, I was awakening, and I wanted to be, an enlightened being, and I wanted to get there as fast as possible. And so I was in this thing where, okay, I remember the first stage of it was I took a tab of LSD and then pretty much sat in a room for 6 hours staring at the mirror with my eyes open while I was meditating. That was like the first one. And I write about it in the book, and it was wild. It was,
Yeah,
that
we'll
still
talk
has,
more about your book.
yeah,
And
that was still profound. And then I think about 2 weeks later, and there was actually not much negative experience from that. I was having more lucid dreams coming into that experience. I was having more lucid dreams after. Then about 2 weeks later, I think I fell in with a crew who were going to use DMT, and then um, that was a very, very strong experience. And I came out of that still feeling okay, but it was kind of like a box got opened, and I started having a lot of strong experiences really quickly, especially being a registered nurse in mental health. One part of me was questioning whether I had a drug-induced psychosis or something. And
Ben, were you
then,
already into Buddhism by that time? Was it like parallel to
yes,
that moment?
yeah. So I was still into Buddhism. I'd been Buddhism was kind of like the beginning of my meditation. It started with Zen Buddhism, and then later into Mahayana. And I didn't have any experience with Vajrayana until after the DMT experience. I just started having the OBEs, out of body experiences, come back as a child. I started having prolific lucid dreams, but just so strong that it was really hard to determine. It was very much just out of my control. It was quite a strong, and
And
for many people I
and
could
you
see
were
it quite
aware by
frightening.
then? Were you aware of what was happening, or did you have an idea?
Not really.
Really?
No, I didn't know. I didn't know yet. No, I didn't know. I knew something was happening, and I remember actually really interesting. I remember I actually at one stage it was so strong that I thought, oh, I should probably go to a doctor and tell him that I'm having all these crazy nightmares and dreams. Yeah, and then
Yeah.
I was like, oh, a normal doctor, like you go to your normal GP, and the normal Western society is going to look at you, and the first thing they're going to do is they're going to want to create some sort of diagnosis. Yeah,
Yes.
they're going to want to be like, oh, okay, this person is schizophrenic, or this person is bipolar, or this person is drug-induced psychosis. So I knew that, being a nurse, I knew that it was basically someone was wanting to give me some sort of medication. And so it was really interesting. A whole lot of factors came together, but they all led to me finding a book called The Tibetan Yogas of Dream and Sleep by a Bon Dzogchen teacher, Tenzin Wagnall. And I remember when I found that book, I guess there's like moments where you find it. When I first got into meditation, I was traveling the world in 2006, and I found this book at the end of the trip, and it was really interesting. I feel like the book was there for me. Like I knew something was on this bookshelf. It was like, I don't know, it's like getting pulled to the bookshelf. And I went to the bookshelf and I found this book by John Kabat-Zinn called Wherever You Go, There You Are.
Yes, I think
And
you told me that story. I love it.
yeah, so that started meditation for me. And then when I found Tenzin Wagnall's book, it was a similar type of experience. It was kind of exactly what I needed at that moment. And he outlined dream yoga and lucid dreaming. He outlined breath practices to stabilize the energy in the body. He outlined how to approach practice. He outlined how to deal with nightmares. And I guess for me, at that time, I felt really powerless in my experience. And then all of a sudden, I came across this wealth of knowledge, which was actually talking about my experiences,
Yeah, it's
and
beautiful.
it was giving me actual tools
And
to
answers,
work.
perhaps, right, to what's happening.
Yeah, and I couldn't find those answers really. LeBurge, I fell into LeBurge's work after that, who wrote a book called Exploring the World of Lucid Dreams, and LeBurge was really good actually. His work with nightmares, he definitely, the work I read from him helped me a lot with nightmares themselves. But the dream yoga practice, it was really interesting as I started to practice from the book. It was more, there were things that I started to find that I could do in my dreams that I, it was more like I remembered how to do things as opposed to I was learning how to do things. It was kind
Mm.
of like rediscovering something.
So you think perhaps, Bennett, this is I mean, I know you mentioned that perhaps, you know, we all have this as kids, but do you think there's some sort of let's say ability or capability or characteristics that a certain person has that will allow them to, you know, enter this practice easily? Or do you think everybody can do it, or for some it's just somehow seems that it's easier, or at least in your case it seems that you had it since you were a kid, you know, and you have like a innate talent for it, let's say, or your innate facility, right, to do it.
Hmm.
So would you say that it's available for everybody, or what's your approach? I mean, because I know you've been teaching this for a while, but what's your personal experience on sharing this with others, you know, during trainings or workshops? Does everybody have the same capability to work with this practice?
Well, I think, yeah, I was lucky that you invited me through, you know, your yoga teaching courses, especially through the 300s, to approach, I guess, dealing with students and the potential of using people with all different capacities. So let's say you go into a yoga class and there's all these different capacities in the same class. So some people are able to do certain things and some people can do them easily and some people can't. And so, though one person can do something easier than another, and another person finds it harder, both the practitioners benefit in some way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a benefit, and some people are more natural than others. So you see some people who do yoga and they can do some incredible things with their body, and you see other people who can't. And I'm probably in the middle with my physical yoga. Like I can't contort myself that much. I've got a lot of old injuries. My physiology of my body and the way my joints are built and attached in different ways makes it impossible really without hurting myself to do some things, especially through my back. But that doesn't mean when I do yoga, just because I can't do a perfect wheel or something, it doesn't mean that when I attempt the practice, I won't gain benefit. So
Yeah.
that's, I guess, the same thing with lucid dreaming is we talk about mindfulness. If we become more mindful of our daily experience through meditation practices, or we become more aware of our practice through, being mindful of what's going on around us and trying to be present, it generally helps us, I guess, make better decisions in our lives and be more aware of our inner experiences and how we relate to them. And the same actually just happens at night. Really, the easiest way to look at dream practice and lucid dream practice is a type of continuation of mindfulness. So we're trying to take mindfulness of the day experience and we take it into the night experience. And sometimes I meet practitioners who they do a lot of day practice and then they don't value the night practice. And to me, I guess it never makes sense, because if the idea is to be present in all experiences and you're attempting to be present in your daily experiences, and then at nighttime you are having experiences when you have a dream cycle or a REM period, you are having experiences, but you're forgetting them or you're not paying attention to them. So you're actually kind of saying, yes, I believe in mindfulness and being aware, but then you go, oh, but that's not important. So it's a very interesting thing. I find it interesting when I do meet practitioners who have certain lineages and they don't see the benefit of dream practice, whereas for me, dream practice is in itself it's essentially any practitioner can use it. You can be Hindi, you can be, you can be anything. You can be Christian, you can be Catholic, you can be Buddhist. And the attempt to become aware of your experience in the night is only going to help you as a person, because you're going to become aware of the totality of your experience. And yes, there are some people who are more natural at it because of their physiology and probably because of the way their brains are wired up. But the fact that both people practice means both people benefit. It's like, say, two people go for a run and one person runs very slowly and one person runs really fast, and one person is technically a better runner than the other. They cover the distance easier. But then you can't devalue the person who's not as good a runner, because they still are getting benefit from running.
Yes, totally. And Ben, I think you tapped an important point there. There was like, imagine that we at least sleep, a normal person, I don't know, between what, 5 to 10 hours, 5 to 8 hours a day. So we do spend like a lot of our time, of our lifetime, sleeping. So having kind of like that disconnection in the sleeping time, right? It does. It does make a difference if we start like thinking about it and think what does happen when we actually sleep, and it's part of who we are as well. So maybe you can you explain a little bit more for those who are not maybe so familiarized with what happens when we are sleeping? So we talked a little bit about the REM and the brain waves, or what does actually happen when you're sleeping, and how can we maybe become more aware of this sleeping time, and start maybe even as simple as it is as remembering our dreams or writing them down. But most of us are maybe disconnected with that. So what would be something that you could maybe tell us a little bit of what happens during our sleep, and then how can we tap more into the awareness of that part of ourselves?
I think the first thing is that you have to feel that it's important to you. So if a practitioner doesn't feel that the exploration of sleep is important, they're never going to be successful as a dream practitioner. It's this thing of your motivation will carry you through the blockages. So you've been sleeping a certain way for a long time. Like, say, if someone's 30 and probably since they were 10 years old, they've been sleeping in primarily quite an unconscious way for at least a third of their day, sometimes more. And it's like a type of habit, and there's a very thick layer of heaviness around sleep where awareness is hard to penetrate or recognize. So it does take practice, and it does take motivation, and it does take repetition. And I'm a pretty disciplined type of person from a lot of sports, and the way I sort of approach my life and my own personal practices. So I had that discipline where I was willing to keep practicing and practicing and practicing and not give up. And so the big one first is that you have to really feel that it has value. And if you look at the different experiences in a sleep cycle. So let's say tonight you go to bed and you start to feel sleepy. So there's this first experience of you're starting to feel sleepy. So that's actually the beginning of sleep. Like, people don't recognize that quite often, is that you are entering the sleep. You're already hitting the sleep cycle at that point. You're becoming sleepy. And so you're awake, but you're starting to feel drowsy. Sometimes you close your eyes a few times, but you can be woken up easily. Sometimes you can get some imagery behind your eyes. If someone took psychedelic drugs or drank a lot of alcohol, sometimes those images behind the eyes can be quite strong, and that's called hypnagogic imagery. And so that's called NREM1. So N means non-REM. So REM means rapid eye movement. So it's terming it as non-rapid eye movement 1 is the first phase. And we're just basically getting drowsy. We're falling in and out of sleep, but we are easily wakeable from that state. And that state's actually quite a really good state to work with affirmations. It's a good state to work with visualizations. It's a good state to work with intent before bed. So in the dream yoga practices, the first 15 minutes before you go to bed is really important. So at the heart of dream yoga is the practice of dying. So they see every time that you go to sleep is that you're actually dying to the world, and that you have an opportunity to practice how you will die, so that you may be able to have awareness through the death process, as opposed to be more going along for the ride. And you may then be able to either awaken or become a Buddha in the death experience, or you may be able to drive the rebirth in a certain direction into what are considered the 6 realms or the 3 worlds. So you
Yeah,
have
that's
that
super
first.
interesting. Maybe we can talk more a little bit later about death, death and that experience. Yeah.
So the first phase is really important, that when you go to sleep in that phase of NREM1, if you want to remember your dreams, that's when you really need to be setting your intention. It might be a gentle affirmation as you fall asleep. Tonight I will remember my dreams, or it might be, if you remember your dreams, it might be, I will recognize my dream as dream and become lucid. And you're just gently thinking that as you pass off to sleep, and that intent will follow you through into the rest of the sleep. So then you go from NREM1 to what's called NREM2. Now, NREM2 is you are basically asleep now. So you're falling asleep. You're starting to lose contact with the outside world. So when we're in NREM1, we still have quite good contact with the outside world. When we hit NREM2, we're really losing contact with the outside world, and we appear to be asleep. Like we look like we're sleeping. And NREM1, NREM2, and especially NREM3. NREM3 is what we call deep sleep, or delta. So our brain waves are in what's called delta.
Oh, I lost you there.
Our brain waves are very long, slow movements. Physiologically, we're very quiet. Our breath rate is very slow. Our heart rate is very slow. Our blood pressure goes down. We release human growth hormone, and we start to recover. So that's like our deep sleep, and it's still called NREM, which means non-rapid eye movement, and rapid eye movement meaning dream. But that NREM2 and especially NREM3 in dream yoga practice is actually considered more important in later phases of dream yoga, because what happens when you hit NREM2 and then NREM3 is that when we dream, there's a dreamer and an experience. But when we're in NREM3, there is no experience, there is no dreamer. There's like a dissolution of everything, like we completely dissolve. And so in that dissolving of everything, it's possible for a practitioner to recognize something in that dissolved experience. So right now we're talking to each other, we are seeing images in the room, we're having our experiences, and underneath that is, and I guess the Dzogchen approach is what's called Rigpa, or primordial awareness, which also can be called universal awareness. And when there's more information going on, it's harder to recognize it. But when there's less information, less experience, it can be easier to recognize pure presence or pure awareness. So the later stages of dream practice, you start to really try, and you're actually trying to maintain a type of awareness through NREM 1 into NREM 2
So you mean
into
aware?
NREM 3.
So in REM 3, you would start being aware that you are the dreamer, or aware of yourself, or aware of the surroundings, or just awareness in general.
Just awareness in general. So you haven't hit REM yet. So different. I guess some people talk about NREM 4. So there's some debate about NREM 3 and 4. So some people just say NREM 1, 2, 3, then REM, which is where dreaming, and then some talk about NREM 1, 2, 3, and 4, but they kind of group 3 and 4 together. When we talk about 3 and 4, though, we're really just talking about deep, dreamless sleep. Most people don't have any awareness of this happening to them. And then what happens from that experience is you then move into REM. So REM is called rapid eye movement sleep. It's generally dreaming consciousness, and our brainwave function goes from the deep delta, so the slow waves, actually, and spikes up to normal waking consciousness. So if we were to put an EEG on your head and measure your brain waves right now, and then we were to do the same thing when you were in the REM cycle with your eyes rapidly moving in the dream, we would know that you would actually be considered as conscious as you are right now. So this is something, as people think about dreaming, sleeping as being restful, but what happens when you hit REM is that you have a sleep paralysis kick in. So it doesn't happen in any other phases, but when you hit the REM, your brain shuts down your ability to move, because it doesn't want you to act out the dream.
Exactly.
So it locks you into that experience of you can't move, and then you start dreaming and you have an experience, and the blood flow in your brain is actually on par or more so going on than your normal waking state. Yes, it's not restful. People think that sleeping is restful, but we've all experienced when we have a strong dream and we wake up and we feel like we've run a million miles or something. So for a practitioner who's well practiced in dream yoga, what they're able to do is they are aware through NREM 1, they are aware through NREM 2, they are still aware through NREM 3 when all experience is dissolved, and then they experience the birth of a dream from that awareness and that space. It's kind of like in this, in Star Trek, you had the holodeck, and the holodeck, there was nothing there, and then all of a sudden the holodeck would make a world come into reality.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happens. It's actually like you have this experience of you're in this space, there's just this presence, it's very peaceful, it's like time doesn't seem to have a concept, and then all of a sudden, it's really interesting, there's like this, I experience it like an energetic shift, and then I start to experience like how the dream is birthing. And it's really interesting because there's a lot of parallels into I guess death and the bardo states, where we die and then we awaken in the bardo, and the bardo being the in between this life and the next life. And it's possible to see how when we have a normal dream, the dream bursts into reality, and then we engage with the dream like it was real. So you think like last night I had a non-lucid dream and something silly was happening, like that made no sense, but I was going along with it, like, oh, this is normal. It's normal for me to, I think it was something stupid, like I had to drive a fridge somewhere and I had to get in the fridge and drive it, and I was like, that would never happen here. But in my ignorance of my non-lucid dream, I would just be like, oh, that's normal, and I go along with the story. And that type of way of engaging is seen as how we tend to engage with the bardo. So what happens is we die, and then we have experiences and we mistake them for real as opposed to projections of our own consciousness. And that mistake is what binds us to samsara and drives the next rebirth.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
okay. No, I was just going to ask you. I'm not sure if you're done with this specific question.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. Because I was going to ask you, since you talked about death, and the bardos, and how we were talking about how everything that we work on a dream state also help us, apply it to our daily living or backwards. Whatever we live also reflects on our dream time. So through this understanding of this concept of Maya, right, and the illusion that everything that we are living here, it's our own creation and our own illusion, the illusion of this in this 3D, in this form world. How do you think this practice also help us realize, by realizing we're in this dream and everything that we're creating is also our illusion, whoever we're dreaming with, our mother may be also reflection of ourselves, or a part of ourselves, or it's also everything that we are creating. So how can that be useful to apply it, let's say, into the realization of this current reality where we are awake? When we are awake, it's also an illusion. What do you think it has helped you link those, because I remember when we met, we were having conversations, super interesting conversations, and I remember you were telling me some practices that you do to initiate, your dream practice. And you could also practice them in your day to day, like looking at your hands. Or I remember you told me that to just look at your hands and remember your hands. So maybe you can share a little bit about that. How do you think that relates, and what things can we start doing in this reality to help us understand, what we are living into this illusion of this world?
Well, you can use, so Padmasambhava, one of the things that he talked about was how you can create a template which isn't necessarily what you're experiencing at that moment, but that template can kind of guide you into the realization. So that's done with deity yoga, where we take on the form of a certain deity and we embody its energetic properties, and then with time we come to recognize those properties as us, and it's a way of sort of creating a template for an awakening. So during the day, there's a lot of things that we can do. Well, first of all, we had the one where we're talking about setting the intention to remember dreams, setting the intention to become lucid, and then when we do wake from our dreams, writing down what we can remember, because it allows us to remember our dreams. And also sometimes if we've had a lucid dream, we might not have remembered. So that the memory aspect we have there, which we'd call the night practice, and then we have the day practice. And so the day practice is, you have the textbook Carlos Castaneda technique, which is during the day, maybe 10 times a day, look at your hand, look away for a moment, and then look back at your hand. And it's a habit that you're ingraining with. Essentially, it's a type of mindfulness check. You are engaging with reality and you're questioning your reality, and you're teaching yourself to question your reality enough during the day so that the habit of questioning your reality will follow you into the night. So, I mean, you can do looking at your hand and looking away. For me, one I do a lot is I test surfaces. So I imagine that I push on a surface like a wall or my hand, and I imagine my hand going through the wall or going through my hand. Or I might look at an object like a car and I might imagine moving it with my mind. And I do it enough during the day that it's quite a common way I become lucid in my dreams. I might be having a non-lucid dream, and then all of a sudden I carry out that habit, not because the dream makes me aware of it. It's more just because I have a habit that I've trained myself during the day, and that induces lucidity. But when you carry out that habit during the day, you look at your hand and you look away, you try and put your hand through the wall, on quite a subtle level, what you're doing is you're breaking the pattern of how you engage during the day. So generally we go along on autopilot for a lot of the day, but you practice something like a mindfulness check, or even just stop 10 times a day for 30 seconds, stop doing what you're doing, and just be present. Look around the room, look around at your experience. Does anything look strange? How did you get here? Is it actually solid? Is my body the same? And it seems like a slightly ridiculous thing to do, but what you're doing is, instead of getting stuck on autopilot, you're kind of breaking autopilot multiple times during the day, which is improving your mindful awareness during the day. And then that mindful awareness will follow you into the night. The other one you can do is not for everyone, but you can actually tell yourself during the day that you're in a dream. So periodically during the day, 10 times a day or so, you actually look around and go, okay, this is a dream. It's all in my head. My body is a dream. The bed is a dream. The house is a dream. My food is a dream. My fear is a dream. And you're creating a template so that when you engage with your dreams, you are more likely to do that. But also, when you're having your experiences in your waking life experiences have less power over you when you view them through the lens as being illusions.
Yeah, it's a beautiful practice of awareness, huh? Of
It's just awareness.
Self-observation. Awareness,
It's
yeah.
awareness. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Very
It's
good.
awareness.
And Ben, how many hours can you be in a lucid dream, or how do you become aware even of how long you are aware of it? Like, how does it work for you, or in your personal practice? Maybe now, of course, you're way more advanced than when you started, but in the beginning, let's say, how would it work for a person who starts practicing? And usually, could it be like in and out of awareness during a dream, or how does it work?
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, the concept of time, once you become lucid, Stephen LaBerge they did a lot of lab experiments in the 80s and 90s. They found that the concept of time, like what feels like 10 minutes, is actually pretty close to 10 minutes once you become lucid. So when you're in a non-lucid dream, time seems to be kind of quite hard to keep track of. But when you're lucid, 10 minutes is about 10 minutes. So once you're lucid, that how long you felt you're lucid for is probably pretty close for how long you were lucid. Now, for most people, they might be lucid for 1 minute. They might be lucid for 2 minutes. And what can happen is you become lucid at one moment in the dream, and you know that you're dreaming, and then something attractive about the dream, or frightening about the dream, or exciting about the dream captures your attention, and you lose your awareness that you're in a dream, and then you start engaging it again as if it was real. So it can be quite common to actually become lucid and then lose lucidity and then find it again. That's why the mindfulness checks during the day, or the reality checks, are really important, because I've had this happen before where I've been lucid and then I've started to lose lucidity, but because I have a habit of checking my reality, I check my reality again, which proves I'm in a dream again, and then it reasserts my lucidity. But as far as how long you can be lucid for, it depends on my practice and what's going on. But I guess at the peak, there was a time where I was pretty much lucid every night, and sometimes a couple of times during the night. And I was maintaining lucidity for what I would say was over an hour. So how you do that is, what happens to maintain lucidity for over an hour is the REM cycle will want to stop. So you'll feel this experience like the dream is ending, and it's quite energetic. You'll feel the dream is going to end, and you feel an ending of the dream, and you feel energetically things are ending and becoming more vague. And if you know what to do, you can stop that happening and keep going. So the Labergian technique is you put your arms out and spin on the spot, and that stimulates the vestibular system in the ears, which keeps the dream body going and can kick off a whole nother cycle of REM. Something I do now, and I kind of learned it myself, is that I focus on the throat chakra. And as I focus on the throat chakra, I feel a swelling at the throat chakra of like energy, and then it kind of snaps back in and moves down. And so what's happening is, as you wake up, the prana is moving upwards from the heart through the throat and into around the forehead. And so it's kind of like you're moving upwards to waking consciousness. So what you can do is, as you feel that happen, it's possible to pull the prana down through your will and hold the prana at the throat chakra and stop it from going upwards, which then keeps you in the dream. And this can be done many times. Like I think at one stage I did it maybe 5 times. And there's interesting things that happen when you extend dream cycles. So your ego mind can really kind of play with you a lot when you start to do this. So when you start to extend dreams, the ego really kind of comes online. And I mean, I've had things where characters telling me in the dream that, I've died, or that I'm going too long and that this is dangerous. It's really interesting. Your ego will start to throw all these things at you because it gets confronted by you being lucid for a long time, because I guess it's been used to you being non-lucid, and then when you start becoming lucid more, it's can be threatened. This is why I say to people that when you start dream practice, it's really important to recognize you will have fearful experiences, because your ego at some stage of the game will become threatened by what you're doing, and it will attempt to scare you out of doing it, really.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that happens during the day, like you think during our waking life that happens, like say we're in a relationship we're not happy with and we decide we're going to break up, and then we tell ourselves a little story on our head about how, well, maybe it's going to be okay, and so we keep going in the relationship, and we make up this little story. That's our ego keeping us in the relationship so that we stay in pain.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Ben, thanks for that. And maybe just in a general, like basics, as I know you've been teaching this and you do workshops and more deeper like studies on this, that maybe you can share a little bit later, where we can reach you or people can reach out if they're interested in practicing. What would be some simple tips? I mean, besides, you already mentioned writing your dreams down and setting the intention before you go to sleep, but anything specific, or any books or any material, anything that you would like to share with people of how they can start getting involved or practicing this dream yoga?
Yeah, there's a lot of literature out there now. Most of it is lucid dream orientated. So I think for most people, there's a book called Exploring the World of Lucid Dreaming by Stephen LaBerge. It's quite an old book, but it's pretty much every lucid dreamer should have it, because it's very clear. It's more psychoanalytic sort of focus, but it's really good for getting people lucid on a more regular basis. So that's a really good book. As far as dream yoga books go, there's a really good book by Alan Wallace called Dreaming Yourself Awake, which is more a blend between lucid dreaming and dream yoga. He's a Westerner. There's another author, Charlie Morley, who wrote a really good book called what was it? Dreams of Awakening, which is quite a funny book. It's quite a relaxed book to read on dreaming. If you want a pure lucid dream, a pure dream yoga book, which is quite advanced, coming at it from the Dzogchen perspective, which is a more subtle approach and more non-dualistic approach than Vajrayana. There's a book that I wrote by Tenzin Wagner called The Tibetan Yogas of Dream and Sleep, which he wrote probably about 10 years ago, I think. I mean, the book I wrote it does have how to do practice. So I have like, what are the key components of practice? How do we practice? How do we build practice? So I cover that. But I'd seen there was a lot of how-to lucid dreaming books out there, and Charlie Morley was one of the few who offered a lot of his own dream experiences, and I when I read his book, I really liked that he kind of put himself out there and he put down some dreams which were, they were dreams which some people might have find scary, or they might find kind of, weird. And I like that he was willing to open up his mind to people in an unbiased way. So what I did with my book was I did offer advice on how to lucid dream, but the main focus of the book was essentially I took a good 3 years of lucid dreams. So I'd written every lucid dream I'd had over 3 years since the beginning of my lucid dreaming, beginning at the inception of the LSD and the DMT and the lead up to it all through a decade of meditation. And I went through each of the pivotal dreams in sequence. And why I did that was because you can see I guess you can see the learning that happened over those 3 years. You can actually see at the end of all those dreams, you can see that the way I engage is very different to the way I engaged 3 years ago. And that's what I find really important, is being able to look back on the way I engage with my dreams and now how I engage with waking reality. And I can see a difference in a positive way. That shows me, I guess, like the power of the practice. But the main one, if you just want to, the sort of nuts and bolts, 1 minute become lucid, it's really, number one is you got to want to remember your dreams when you go to sleep. Really want to remember. Have something to write your dreams down on. Be willing to put the time into it to write your dreams down, because it will help you become lucid more regularly, because you'll see regular things that you can dream of. And those regular little things you dream of, it might be my mother when she's 30 and now she's 60, or it might be I'm by the beach and the waves are more like concrete and not made of water. Those little regular things you dream of, instead of psychoanalyzing what they mean, what you're doing is you're using them to become aware of next time you dream so that you can pick them up. Yeah. So it's kind of like you're going, okay, if I dream of my mother when she's 30, I know I will be dreaming because my mother is not 30 now, she's 60. And so I can use those dream signs to help me. So you've got intention, diary, dream signs, and then you've got mindfulness or reality checks. So during the day, pick something you're going to do 10 times a day, be it just stop for 30 seconds and look around and be aware, be it look at your hand and look away, be it put your hand through the wall and see if it goes through. And if you sort of put all those together, also try and saturate yourself with stuff to do with lucid dreaming. So like if people are listening to this podcast right now, you have more chance tonight now of actually having a lucid dream. And it's not because magic happened and I did some voodoo to you. It's because you sat down for an hour and you listened to something about lucid dreaming, which made you more motivated and aware of lucid dreaming, so that when you go to bed tonight, you were more likely to have a lucid dream. Or if you got friends that like to talk about their dreams together or talk about lucid dreams, or maybe listening to podcasts or audio books or reading books. And by doing that, you create intention to become lucid. So that's a really important thing, is that saturating yourself with content around dream yoga and lucid dreaming in itself will create the parameters. Like when I worked on your course, I saw a lot of students in the last course we did in September in Bali become lucid. And it was really because we sat around and talked about it heaps and talked about our dreams heaps. And that had a sort of knock-on effect every night that I worked with them, not because of anything magic. It was just because the group themselves were all motivated, and they were all actually, I think they were in a dorm together. So they were all kind of getting up and practicing and working together.
There's a lot of motivation. Well, thank you so much. And I'm going to definitely, I'm going to set here the link of your book. Totally recommend it to people to read. It's a very nice sharing introduction about your experience and very easy to read. So I'm going to have it. The link here is on Etsy and Amazon as well if people want to get it. And I'm going to make sure that I include all your contact here on the different platforms so people can connect with you if they have questions. And Do you want to share a little bit of what you're doing right now, or where can people can connect with you? I know we're right now having this, well, difficult, challenging times, but how can people connect with you, or is there anything that you're offering right now this time online?
So I have, online I have through Amazon.com, I have the book, Etsy I have the book as well, and also children's books. One's sort of about lucid dreaming, one's about meditation, one's about yoga. As far as like teaching, I'm not really doing like online classes for any studios at the moment. I think at the moment what I'm looking at doing is mentoring people with their dream practices. And I mean, mentoring people with them includes meditations that will help their lucid dreaming practices, ways to help break through blockages, be it they're not remembering, be it they're not becoming lucid. And I guess the idea at the moment is offering something, say, like 2 40-minute sessions a week over 4 weeks. And basically what we do is we start from where the practitioner is, and over those 4 weeks we work really, I guess, really closely with exactly, I guess that's the hard thing when I teach workshops, is when I teach workshops, normally I teach a heap of workshops, but because of what's going on in the world right now,
Yes, right
that's
now
not
we're
happening.
on pause. Yeah,
um, I I may look at doing an online workshop, so I might do something where 30 people can sign on to an online workshop that we do at a certain time for 2 hours, similar to what I used to do when I go to yoga studios, but also the private thing for people who are quite serious. You will obviously progress a lot quicker, because when I deal with a 30 people group, I have to disseminate the information for 30 people, which means I can only give people a certain amount. But when I deal
exactly.
with a practitioner one to one, I can
More
tailor
personal. Yeah,
things
that
one
would be
directly.
great. That would be great.
So that's the idea. The idea is, I mean, you can contact me if you go through the links on benmackinnonyoga.com. You can even message me on Instagram or Facebook. It's all the same, just benmackinnonyoga.com. I've set up a Zoom thing, and I'm sort of just getting ready to change some things on the website to go down that road. So that's
Awesome,
probably where
Ben.
I'm at the moment. Yeah.
Thanks. I'm going to share that for sure, the links. And well, to finish, I have a few questions that I like asking people. So I would like your input about them. The first question would be like, what does conscious living mean to you, and how can that, how can we work as an individual and as a collective, let's say, to be more conscious? What's your take on that?
Uh, well, I guess why I'm so pro dream practice is that I've seen that by becoming aware in my dreams, it's improved the consciousness and awareness I have during my waking state. And that, I mean, sometimes I'll do the same dumb things I've done in the past, but I'm more aware of what I'm doing. So I guess it's why I'm so pro dream practice, is it's a way of, things happen really quick in dream practice. So, I mean, if I say to people who become more advanced in dream practice, the first time you attempt to meditate in the dream, you find out something really, really obvious about the dream, which is the dream state, everything is much stronger than the waking state, and things can happen really rapidly. So, say if you meditate for half an hour during the day, if you can handle like a minute of meditation in a lucid dream, you've done really well, because the speed that everything's happening at in the dream is so fast, because it's a pure mental state, but the effect of the meditation is really quick. So, say the Tibetan Buddhists used to say, a moment of meditation in a lucid dream was worth a week-long retreat, because of the impact that you'd have on your mind, because you're going directly to the mind. So, the conscious thing, I think, being conscious, I mean, there's a lot of, it's a pretty buzzword. I think being conscious is just being aware of your impact on others, your impact on the world, your impact on yourself when you're playing out your old patterns, when you're not. Kind of knowing when you have a good moment in your life. Like, I'm basically 40 now, and I look back on my life, and probably by being less conscious, I missed a lot of moments in my life that were really good moments because I was too busy trying to get to the next thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that's a big thing about being conscious is I'm learning more and more that like you can do things and you can achieve things and you can become better at things, and that's a good thing to do. But as far as actually being happy, I think unless you're conscious and aware at this moment, it's you're never going to be happy. It's just so you never will get there. And so being conscious is, yeah, I think like being conscious and aware is kind of like the only way you can really ever find being happy, I suppose.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ben, for that. And my last question is like, if you just had one important thing or one chance to share the most important message you consider humanity needs to hear right now, what would that message be?
Oh,
Mm.
I'd say, I guess, experientially, uh, people are very afraid of being themselves. Yeah. So I think what happens is people are born into this world and they are an emanation of, primordial awareness or Rigpa, and they are this mind stream which comes out of it, which has its own properties and its own story and its own previous lives. And each of those are very unique. And yes, they're all linked to the one, but they're all their unique expression. Like, when you see the prism and the different color lights come through the prism when the light hits it, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, the indigo light is the same as the red light because they both come from the light that hits the prism, but the indigo light is very different in how it looks and to the red light. And so I think people really desperately want to be themselves, and then they go about life and they are conditioned, or they try to act in ways so that people will love them or care for them, or they might get what they need, and they lose connection to what they always were. And so I guess if I could say one thing, it would just be, I think we know when we're bullshitting ourselves and we're putting on a show.
Mm-hmm.
And my advice is just stop bullshitting yourself, stop bullshitting everyone else, stop putting on a show, and just be yourself. And yes, you'll lose some people, and yes, you'll gain some other people, but being yourself is kind of it's the only thing you can kind of keep up, and the only thing that is going to ever satisfy you. Otherwise, it's kind of go through your life being like an actor in a movie, and you'll get to the end of your life and kind of feel like the whole thing was there's no substance to it, I
Yeah,
suppose.
yeah, been genuine.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful, Ben. Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close?
No, I mean it's one of those things like when I teach this at workshops, I first my workshops were 2 hours and now they're 3 hours, and even at the end of a 3 hour one, it's like you never get to the end of it. Like people have only got more questions and there's more to go into. And so it's
Yeah,
like
so big
the
this
thing
topic.
is that yeah, we can it's an endless subject. It's a very deep subject. So my advice is that for some people they have a connection to dream practices. It's something that makes sense to them. And if that's the case, then there's potential to discover many incredible things about yourself and about the world and about the past and about the future, and work with it in that way. And my advice is just keep that practice going. And also, I think, like, don't we do this thing where we need people to agree with us. Like I'm a little bit like, yes, I practice Dzogchen, and yes, that type of Dzogchen is connected to the Nyingmapa lineage and things like that. But also, I think it's really important to not become brainwashed by a institution or a type of path. So say I see a lot of practitioners who follow a type of yoga path, and it nearly becomes like they become indoctrinated into a certain way of thinking.
Just it's another approach to attaching to another kind of truth, right? So we're still attaching.
Yeah. And realistically, the only truth that matters is not the truth that someone imposes on you. The only truth that matters is what you come to understand experientially as truth. And in all honesty, you don't need anyone else to agree with you.
Yeah. Thank you, Ben.
You just don't. You don't need anyone to agree with you.
Beautiful advice. And yeah, I'm so glad we got to chat a little bit. Ben is a good friend, and I was so happy to have him share about his teachings and a little introduction, right? Because it's such a deep subject. I hope we can talk more later, because I'm super interested on also diving into the topic of death and bardos and all that with you later on in maybe in another opportunity. Yeah.
Oh, good.
All right. So thank you very much, Ben. Thank you for your time. It's a pleasure to have you in this conversation. And I hope people connect with you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ben. And thank you guys for listening. We'll be uploading more podcasts soon. So thank you so much. And have a beautiful rest of the day. And I hope this information on lucid dreaming was interesting for all of you. And I'll be sharing Ben's info here on the links. Thank you. Bye-bye.